Has this ever happened to you? You gave your best, your trust, your patience, your love. You listened when they cried. You forgave when they failed. You stayed when they made it difficult to stay. And still they walked away. Not with regret, not with humility, but with arrogance. Worse, they pretended it was your fault. And now you wonder, where is the justice? Sign 1, the loud performance of happiness. You scroll through their life and it seems like they're thriving. New photos, new people, a curated highlight reel of joy, as if your pain never happened, as if your love was disposable. But the truth is, Stoicism teaches us, life doesn't settle accounts in public. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy, because the Stoic doesn't chase justice, they become it. Karma, or more precisely, cosmic cause and effect, doesn't always act with thunder. It often arrives like a whisper at midnight in moments that no one else sees. You might not witness their reckoning, but if you look closely, you'll see the silent signs that karma is already at work. Let's begin with perhaps the most deceptive sign of all, when someone who hurt you suddenly appears happier than ever. They broadcast their so-called peace to the world, laughing, traveling, posting aesthetic sunsets with vague captions about healing. They tag new people, smile in new places, declare they're moving on like they weren't the ones who detonated the relationship. And for a moment, you feel that pang. Was it really me? Did they win? No, what you're seeing is not joy. It's a performance. Real happiness, according to Epictetus, is internal. It doesn't crave an audience. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control, he said. And when someone rushes to prove they're free of you, they are still deeply bound to you. Look at their eyes, not their smile. You'll see the weariness in their gaze, the agitation in their words, the overcompensation in every photo. This is not confidence, it is guilt dressed in glitter. It is a desperate attempt to drown out the voice that says, you ruined something real. Take the case of Lance Armstrong. Once celebrated as a world hero, Tour de France champion, cancer survivor, inspiration to millions. His brand was strength, perseverance, and comeback. But behind the curtain, he was concealing years of dishonesty and betrayal. When the truth surfaced, the public fallout was massive. But what was more damaging than the loss of titles or sponsorships was the erosion of credibility, of self-worth. In interviews, you could see it. A man fighting a war not with the world, but with his own reflection. That's what happens when karma moves silently. It hollows people from the inside. It whispers when the crowd is gone. It questions them in the stillness of morning and the silence before sleep. So if you're watching someone who wronged you pretend to glow up, don't be deceived. This is not peace, it is panic disguised as progress. True healing doesn't post itself, it humbles you, it grounds you, it makes you quieter, not louder. And here, where your strength lies. You do not need to correct the record, you don't have to defend yourself. As Seneca taught, a wise man is indifferent to what he cannot control. Let them speak, let them pretend, let them edit the narrative to suit their pride, because karma is not loud, but it is precise. And in time, they will be left alone with the consequences of who they've become. Let this first sign serve not as a reminder of what they did, but of what you chose not to become. You walked away from noise and chose silence. You left behind chaos and chose clarity. You didn't betray, you endured. And that choice in itself is the beginning of your karmic reward. Sign 2, the erosion begins when life quietly starts taking things away. There's a kind of justice that doesn't wear a robe or swing a gavel. It doesn't come with flashing lights or dramatic fallout, no public disgrace. No confrontation, no screaming confessions, just absence, quiet, precise, and unrelenting. Karma doesn't always strike with fire. More often, it arrives with a whisper and a subtraction. You see, when someone mistreats a good person, someone who was loyal, honest, and consistent, life doesn't always punish them instantly, but it begins removing. It starts small, a friend who stops replying, a professional connection that fades, a stroke of good fortune that inexplicably reverses, not enough to panic over at first, just enough to feel a shift. But Stoicism teaches that nothing is coincidence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." The world doesn't forget our choices, it just doesn't always rush to respond. Imagine someone who once thought your loyalty was guaranteed. They mocked your emotional sensitivity, they took advantage of your empathy, they thought your presence was ordinary, so they walked away from it, or worse, destroyed it. And now, piece by piece, they're starting to feel the void. At first they feel fine, light, unbothered, free, but the silence you left behind begins to echo. The comfort they dismissed becomes conspicuous by its absence, and life in its quiet wisdom begins to subtract, not out of anger but out of balance. We see this unfold again and again, quietly and often in the lives of public figures. Take the story of Ellen DeGeneres. Once praised as the face of kindness, her empire crumbled, not through a single catastrophic event, but through a gradual erosion. A toxic workplace here, a mistreated staff member there. Whispers became rumors, and rumors became investigations. Suddenly, what once felt unshakable was gone: brand deals, partnerships, credibility. Not with a bang, but with a silence too loud to ignore. That's how karma works. It's not vengeance, it's revelation. When you treat people like they're replaceable, life replaces the wrong things instead. Opportunities slip through their hands without explanation. Connections feel thinner, relationships more transactional. They look around, and the ecosystem of support they used to count on has thinned, like soil stripped of nutrients. And they wonder, why does everything feel harder now? The answer: because they used to be anchored by your care, your loyalty, your calm presence, and they didn't realize it was the center of gravity holding them in place. Seneca reminds us no man was ever wise by chance. Likewise, no downfall is entirely random. It's the harvest of the seeds we sowed in arrogance, distraction, or cruelty. They may not say your name, they may not connect the dots. But deep down they feel the shift. The circle is smaller, the warmth is gone, they reach out, but the depth isn't there anymore. And the people who replace you, they can't fill that emotional role because what you offered wasn't surface level. It was soul level. Real support is irreplaceable, and real emotional space is sacred. And now, for the first time, they feel what they once made you feel: unseen, unimportant, alone. This is not punishment, this is education. And it's karmic in the purest Stoic sense, not a spiritual curse, but the logical result of imbalance. When someone violates the integrity of a healthy connection, they're not just breaking a bond, they're eroding a part of themselves that could recognize, build, and sustain that bond again. And when it's gone, it's not just the person that's missing. It's the version of themselves that existed only in the presence of your love. So don't chase after them. Don't try to make them see what they've lost. Karma is already doing the work you never could. It's removing their illusions. It's pruning their pride. It's confronting them with the truth, one loss at a time. Let it happen. Because while they're still wondering why things are changing, you already know. And your wisdom, the choice to walk away instead of retaliate, is proof that you're no longer trapped in the cycle they tried to drag you into. You've outgrown the pain, they're just starting to feel its echo. Sign 3. Living rent-free when you still occupy their thoughts and silence. There's a silence more deafening than words, when someone who hurt you still speaks to you without ever saying your name. They post vague quotes about healing from betrayal. They share cryptic captions about fake friends, toxic people, or letting go of the past. They start stories with "some people never appreciated me." But you already know those stories are about you, and yet they never tag you. They never message, they never admit, because this isn't closure, it's compulsion. This is the third sign that karma is quietly at work. You're gone from their life, but you're not gone from their mind. Modern psychology calls this displaced guilt. Stoicism calls it conscience, and both agree on one thing: the more someone hides a wound, the more it festers. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So when a person thinks of you constantly, bitterly, secretly, they begin to live in that hue of shame, longing, and confusion, even if they pretend they've healed. Here's the truth they won't say out loud: you were the one who knew them. You were the one who listened when they collapsed. You forgave them when they were reckless. And in that safety, they did the most dangerous thing. They forgot your value. Now they're haunted not by your presence, but by your absence. They tried to rewrite the narrative, to justify what they did. They reshaped their story so they don't have to face the fact they lost someone who actually saw them. And so, the subconscious leaks. It leaks into social media, into conversations, into those sudden late-night posts they delete by morning. You see, the Stoics believed the mind was not a battlefield but a mirror. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." For he is not permitted to prove himself. Now they're facing the adversity of silence, and in that silence they are proving themselves to themselves. There's no crowd, no praise, just the whisper of guilt in the hours after midnight. And the worst part, they know they can't reach out. They know they shouldn't, but they want to, because karma works through mental occupation, not as a curse, but as clarity. This is the mind's way of trying to make peace with itself. You may think if they regret it, why don't they just apologize? But regret and humility aren't always friends. An ego, especially a wounded one, would rather suffer in silence than admit it was wrong. And this is where your discipline must rise, because a Stoic doesn't chase unfinished stories. A Stoic doesn't take the bait. A Stoic doesn't need the final word. You don't need to respond with a vague quote of your own. You don't need to reply with passive-aggressive wisdom. You don't need to post your growth as proof. Growth is its own proof, and silence is its loudest form. This doesn't mean they're a monster. It means they're human, and they're now in the grip of the very emotions they once made you feel. Let's take the example of Princess Diana and Prince Charles. After years of being sidelined, dismissed, and neglected, Diana didn't retaliate with cruelty. She didn't campaign to destroy Charles's image. Instead, she told her story once, calmly, clearly, and then chose grace over gossip. And yet, decades later, it's her dignity that lives in the memory of millions. Meanwhile, Charles spent years trying to reshape public perception, but public perception is rarely shaped by spin, it is shaped by spirit, and karma never forgets character. In your own story, you may never get a confession. They may never publicly say, "I lost someone incredible," but you'll feel it in the patterns. You'll see it in the way they orbit around your energy without getting close. You'll notice it in the breadcrumbs of guilt they scatter, hoping you'll still be watching. But don't, your energy doesn't belong there anymore. You've graduated from their chaos. You've evolved beyond the noise. Let them talk in circles. Let them hint and post and spiral. You no longer need to respond. Why? Because they're already responding to what they did to you, and that in itself is karma's most intimate justice. Sign 4, the collapse of trust, how guilt turns them against the world and themselves. At first, they act untouched. They say things like, "I've learned not to trust anyone. People always let me down. I don't let anyone in anymore, and if you didn't know better, you might believe them." You might think they've become wiser, stronger, selective. But beneath those words is not power, it's paranoia. This is not wisdom, it's guilt wearing the mask of boundaries. This is the 4th sign karma is at work. They lose their ability to trust others because they can no longer trust themselves. Seneca wrote, "He who does wrong rarely trusts anyone else because he knows what he himself is capable of." When someone harms you and walks away like it didn't matter, something begins to unravel inside them. Slowly, silently, intimately. Not just their connection to you, but their connection to themselves, because now they've tasted what it's like to betray someone good, and that knowledge doesn't just disappear, it follows them. When they meet new people, they look for signs of betrayal, even in kindness. When someone shows care, they question the motive. When someone offers love, they brace for manipulation. Why? Because they've seen what they are capable of doing to someone who offered the same. This is karma's most invisible punishment, self-suspicion. A voice that says, if I did that to someone good, what will someone do to me? It begins quietly. They keep their circles small, they stop laughing as much, they get tense when someone gets too close. They misread kindness as control, they mistake openness for strategy, and soon their world starts to shrink, not physically but emotionally. Every conversation becomes a scan for threats, every silence becomes suspicion, every new bond becomes another potential betrayal, and all of this, the fear, the doubt, the emotional lockdown, stems not from what others have done, but from what they did and never fully faced. The Stoics warned of this. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And when someone reacts to guilt by pretending it never happened, the mind turns inward like a fortress. Walls go up. But not to protect, they go up to punish. They tell themselves, I don't trust people anymore, but the truth is, they don't trust themselves to choose people wisely. They no longer trust their own judgment. Because if they were capable of hurting someone pure, someone loyal, someone who never gave them a reason to doubt and still walked away, then what does that say about who they are? This is what Stoicism reveals. The deepest peace comes from living in alignment with your values. And when someone violates those values, they don't just lose people, they lose themselves. We saw this in the life of Tiger Woods. After years of dominance, a personal scandal erupted, not just damaging his career, but fracturing the image he had of himself. The world watched the headlines, but what mattered most was invisible. The erosion of trust, not from others, but from within. The same thing happens privately to the person who wronged you. They lose that quiet confidence. They second-guess everything. They replay the past, but not out of nostalgia, out of fear that karma is on the way. And they're right, because karma, especially through the Stoic lens, doesn't require grand punishment. It simply gives us ourselves, unfiltered. So if you hear that they've become cold, withdrawn, distrustful, don't confuse that with evolution. That's not growth. That's guilt that's never been transmuted. It's pain that's never been alchemized into wisdom. They carry it with them into every room, every conversation, every connection. A kind of emotional rust that spreads across the soul. And here's what makes this karmic. The one person who could have helped them through this, the one person they once trusted, confided in, laughed with, cried to, is now gone. Not because you became cold, but because you chose peace. You no longer live in that emotional storm. You no longer carry the weight of their guilt. You handed it back to its rightful owner. And now karma does what karma does best. It creates a mirror, not to punish, but to reveal. And the reflection they see isn't cruel, it's accurate. Let them live with it. Let them walk through the fog they created. Because while they push everyone away in fear, you have stepped into a new power. You trust again. You love again. You live again, fully, freely, without the weight of someone else's damage on your shoulders. That is Stoic clarity. That is the reward of restraint. That is what karma looks like, not revenge, but return to self. Sign 5, the karmic mirror, meeting a reflection of the pain they once caused. Karma in its quietest form is not punishment. It is perspective, the final and most undeniable sign that someone is receiving their karma silently is this. They meet a person who treats them exactly as they once treated you, not just a difficult partner. Not just a rough relationship, but a mirror, a walking reflection of everything they once were, placed directly in front of them, disguised as destiny. In the beginning, it feels magical. The chemistry is electric, the attraction intense, they think. Finally, someone who gets me, but the universe is not offering them connection. It's offering them clarity. What begins as infatuation turns quickly into confusion. The warmth they were once given turns cold. The affection they used to control becomes unpredictable. They begin chasing words, gestures, reassurance, only to be met with silence, delay, or emotional withdrawal. And suddenly, they are on the other side of the game they once played. This is not poetic justice. This is psychological recognition. Pattern meets reflection. They used to laugh at how much you cared. Now they cry over someone who couldn't care less. They once mocked your vulnerability. Now they open up and get mocked in return. They once called you too emotional, too much. Now they hear those words thrown at them by someone they love more than they should. They tell themselves, this person is just complicated. They have issues. They've been hurt before, but beneath every rationalization, a horrifying thought begins to rise. This is what I did to someone. They don't say it out loud. They may never admit it to anyone else, but they can't escape it. It shows up in the silence after an unanswered text, in the hollow feeling after a meaningless apology, in the ache of realizing they are not being chosen. This is the Stoic view of divine reordering, not revenge, not destruction, but restoration, not through punishment, but through experience. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And this is where you win, not through watching them suffer, not through hoping they hurt, but by rising so far above the level they brought you down to that they can no longer reach the version of you they once mistreated. Let them meet their match. Let them beg for the love they once took for granted. Let them feel the sting of being misunderstood, discarded, or treated as optional, because only then do they finally understand what they had and what they lost. Consider the story of Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears. Once she was vilified and mocked while he rose in popularity, but decades later the roles reversed, not because she fought back, but because the truth always returns, not through force, through exposure. And that's how karma functions in the Stoic universe. It doesn't chase, it reflects, it waits until the lesson is felt, not just taught. You don't have to make sure they learn it. Life has already enrolled them in a curriculum they can't drop. They are living in the very emotional chaos they once created, but now there's no one to manipulate, no one to gaslight, no one to spin the narrative for. Because the pain they're feeling didn't come from a villain, it came from themselves in a different body. And this is what you must remember. Your job was never to teach them the lesson. Your job was to walk away and become the lesson. Let your silence do the work now. Let their story unfold without your interference. Because while they try to rebuild themselves from the ruins they created, you've already stepped into a life that no longer bends toward dysfunction. And that's the true Stoic way, to let go not for them but for you, to reclaim peace not through reaction but through self-respect, to release the desire to see karma happen and trust that it already is. So what now? You stay silent. You grow inward, you become someone they'll never have access to again, not because you hate them, but because you've outgrown the conditions that allowed them to stay. And if they ever ask, why is this happening to me? The answer is simple. You're not being punished, you're being shown. You don't have to fight people who are already fighting themselves. Let karma finish the conversation your dignity refused to beg for. As Seneca said, it is the power of the mind to be unconquerable. So choose clarity over closure, choose discipline over drama, and let karma do what karma does best. You keep walking calm, strong, unshakable. If this message spoke to you, let others know they're not alone. Comment with the line that hit you hardest. And if you're walking this path of silence and inner strength, subscribe to Unshakeable Calm. We don't just talk about healing. We train the mind to lead, not react. We build clarity. We build discipline. We build unshakable peace. Because that's not revenge, that's evolution. And the world watches in silence because growth like this makes noise without a sound.